Hi, I'm Imi. I'm the author of Mapping the Human Mind, a philosophical journey through time, thought, and consciousness. I'll be reading it one chapter at a time. This is Chapter 1. From Survival to Significance. The Birth of Belief. At Theopetra, cave in Greece, archaeologists discovered a 23,000-year-old stone circle arranged around what was once a fire pit. The people who gathered there, our ancestors, would have sat beneath the same stars we see today, but with a very different understanding. As the fire crackled and shadows danced across the cave walls, early humans gazed at the vast night sky stretching overhead. In that moment of awe and vulnerability, the questions would have been unavoidable. Why does the sun disappear every night? Why do storms rage without warning? And what's that weird noise in the bushes? Spoiler. Probably something with sharp teeth. These questions were about survival, not passing thoughts. Understanding the world, or at least believing we understood it, gave us a sense of control in an otherwise chaotic environment. When a group shared the same explanation for why animals migrated or why sickness spread, it created a common story. And common stories built communities. Shared beliefs fostered understanding and cooperation. They helped early humans decide who to trust, who to fear, and who to follow. Belief offered comfort, yes, but it was also cohesion, a tool that shaped group identity and strengthened the bonds between people. They helped explain the unexplainable. Over time, these shared stories evolved into complex systems, providing frameworks not only for what we believed, but for how we lived. These beliefs shaped moral codes, social hierarchies, and even the political systems that govern us today. In short, belief became the glue that held society together. Evolution gave us empathy and gossip. If you're wondering how we got here, evolution's got your back. Our instincts for empathy, altruism, and trust didn't appear out of nowhere. They were fine-tuned by natural selection because they made us better at surviving together. Human brains evolved to be hypersocial. We're wired for connection in ways that other species simply aren't. Even our closest primate relatives don't match our capacity for cooperation across large groups of unrelated individuals. This neural architecture allowed our ancestors to form complex social bonds and share cognitive loads in ways that transformed individual weakness into collective strength. Consider the evolutionary puzzle of human infants. Unlike other primates, our babies are born remarkably helpless, requiring years of sustained care. This vulnerability would be a death sentence for a solitary species, but for humans it created selective pressure for deeper social bonds and cooperative childcare. The survival of vulnerable infants depended on trusted social networks, which in turn required reliable ways to determine who could be counted on. But cooperation alone wasn't enough. Early humans needed a way to navigate group dynamics, reinforce shared values, and, let's be honest, keep tabs on everyone's business. That's where language came in. Communication began simply, gestures, grunts, but once it evolved into storytelling, everything changed. We didn't just survive the world together, we understood the world together. Robin Dunbar, an anthropologist and evolutionary psychologist, suggests that language itself may have evolved primarily as a social grooming mechanism, a more efficient way to maintain relationships than the physical grooming common among other primates. Our larger social groups simply required more efficient bonding techniques. We developed language not only to coordinate hunts or warn of danger, but to maintain the social fabric itself. Anthropologists call this coalitional monitoring. It wasn't idle chat, it was early moral infrastructure. When someone violated group norms, stories about their transgression spread, warning others and reinforcing boundaries. When someone showed exceptional generosity, tales of their deeds elevated their status. The rules were unwritten, but everyone knew them, because everyone was watching and talking. The power of shared stories. As language evolved, we didn't just talk about each other, we talked about the world. We told stories. We wove meaning from events, turned patterns into purpose. And from those stories came the earliest belief systems, narratives to make sense of chaos and bind us to something bigger. Evolutionary psychologists have identified what they call narrative transportation, our brain's remarkable ability to become immersed in stories as if we were experiencing them firsthand. This cognitive trait allowed our ancestors to learn from others' experiences without having to face the same dangers personally. If someone survived an encounter with a predator or discovered which plants caused illness, sharing that story could save lives. Our brains evolved to pay special attention to narratives, particularly those with emotional impact or survival relevance. The stories that stuck, the ones remembered and retold, weren't random. They were the ones that helped the group navigate life's challenges. Tales of ancestors who broke taboos and suffered consequences taught moral lessons. Stories about the origins of natural phenomena, why thunder booms or why seasons change, provided practical frameworks for understanding the world. These were cognitive tools that helped humans predict, prepare, and persist. Neuroscience reveals that when we hear a compelling story, our brains release oxytocin, the same chemical involved in bonding with loved ones. This neurochemical response brings us closer together through narrative. When early humans gathered to share stories about their gods or ancestors, they weren't simply passing time. They were strengthening neural pathways of connection, belonging, and shared identity. This instinct didn't fade, it evolved. Today, it courses through social media. Trust, loyalty, and norms are still being measured, but now through group chats, comment threads, and passive likes. The dopamine hit from a notification isn't so different from the firelit nods our ancestors gave when a shared story resonated. From mythic chants to viral memes, human beings have always shared meaning to feel seen, understood, and connected. But connection was only one part of the equation. Beneath every story, whether whispered in a cave or typed in a group chat, was something deeper, the need to make sense of the world. How our brains build reality. Before we had words or Wi-Fi, early humans gathered close to the fire, scanning for patterns in their environment. Every rustle in the grass might have signaled a predator. Every shadow could conceal a threat. Those who assumed intention behind these events, who played it safe and fled, were more likely to survive and pass on their genes. We call this innate tendency to perceive purpose and agency in the environment agent detection bias, or more formally, hyperactive agency detection device, HADD. It's a cognitive mechanism that evolved because the cost of false positives, seeing an agent where there isn't one, was far lower than the cost of false negatives, failing to detect an actual predator. In evolutionary terms, it was better to mistake the rustling of leaves for a tiger 100 times than to mistake an actual tiger for the rustling of leaves, even once. Cognitive scientists have demonstrated this bias through fascinating experiments. When shown random moving dots on a screen, participants typically describe them as chasing or following each other, attributing intention to completely random movement. When unexpected events occur, a car breaks down, a pandemic emerges, a natural disaster strikes, our first instinct is often to ask, "Why is this happening?" rather than accepting randomness. Our brains are hardwired to seek agents and intentions, even when none exist. But this bias didn't just help with avoiding predators. It also led to the projection of consciousness and intention onto the natural world itself. To early humans, lightning meant more than an atmospheric discharge. It was Zeus's anger. Disease was a spirit's punishment. The sun didn't simply rise and set. It was carried across the sky by deities or cosmic beings. Weather patterns, animal migrations, and seasonal changes all took on purpose and meaning. In the minds of early humans, these weren't random or mechanical processes. They were woven into an intentional cosmic order. From these assumptions, stories began to emerge. stories of God, spirits, and unseen forces shaping the rhythms of life. These narratives weren't mere entertainment, they became the earliest belief systems, tools for structuring reality in a time defined by mystery and threat. By giving agency to natural forces, our ancestors gained a sense of control. If weather was caused by a god's mood, perhaps that god could be appeased through ritual or sacrifice. If illness came from spiritual displeasure, perhaps right behavior could prevent it. This cognitive architecture, so useful for surviving in hostile environments, became the foundation for religious and supernatural thinking across all human cultures. The same neural systems that helped us detect predators in the shadows eventually built cathedrals, developed theological doctrines, and crafted elaborate mythologies to explain the human experience. This same architecture didn't just shape how we understood the world, it shaped how we behaved within it. Once belief systems emerged, they didn't only explain the unseen forces around us, they also began to regulate the social forces between us. And one of the most powerful tools for maintaining social order, the feeling of being watched. The social observer effect. Being observed has always shaped human behavior. In small tribes, the knowledge that others were watching ensured cooperation and social order. When people knew they were being seen, they were more likely to follow shared rules, uphold traditions, and avoid actions that might cause conflict. Religions reflected this human need for accountability. The eye of Horus in Egypt, the omnipresent gaze of Zeus, and the watchful spirits of ancestors in countless belief systems all reinforced the idea that someone, or something, was always watching. Divine surveillance was a powerful tool, one that encouraged moral behavior even when no human eyes were around. The gods didn't just reward devotion, they punished transgression. This belief in an all-seeing presence served more than a spiritual role. It was an early form of social control that helped societies function. This ancient mechanism of accountability didn't disappear with time, it simply evolved. If gods once watched from the sky, today's watchers sit behind screens. The digital age has amplified the observer effect to an unprecedented scale. Social media has created a world where every action, opinion, and moment is subject to visibility, judgment, and validation. Whether we admit it or not, we adjust our behavior under this invisible gaze. We curate our lives for approval, we shape opinions to align with our digital communities, and we internalize the expectations of an audience we can't always see. But even without an audience, our perception is never neutral. The invisible gaze we respond to isn't just external, it's internal too. Our brains come equipped with their own set of filters, shaping what we notice, how we interpret it, and ultimately, what we believe to be true. Why we see what we expect to see. One of the brain's sneakiest tricks is confirmation bias, the habit of noticing things that support what we already believe while tuning out anything that doesn't. It's not just an occasional glitch, it's a deeply embedded survival strategy, a feature of how the mind protects its worldview. This bias operates at a neurological level. Our brains process information differently, depending on whether it confirms or challenges our existing beliefs. Functional MRI studies show that belief-confirming information activates the brain's reward centers, lighting us up with dopamine. In contrast, contradictory information lights up regions associated with conflict and emotional discomfort. We're not just being stubborn, we're neurochemically incentivized to maintain internal consistency. Evolutionarily, this made sense. In high-stakes situations, hesitation could kill. A hunter who stuck with a reliable belief about danger likely survived longer than one who constantly re-evaluated the risk. But there's a cognitive cost to this shortcut, especially in complex modern environments. The deeper problem arises when something does challenge our worldview and can't be ignored. That's when we experience cognitive dissonance, a deeply uncomfortable psychological tension caused by holding two contradictory beliefs, or being forced to confront evidence that contradicts what we think we know. The brain doesn't like this. It wants resolution. So we rationalize, reject, or reshape reality to make it fit. You've seen it in action. Someone starts reading their daily horoscope, and suddenly every awkward meeting or flat tire is just Mercury retrograde doing its thing. Once a belief settles in, the mind starts filtering reality to match it. Political partisans can watch the same debate and come away with opposite conclusions. Sports fans can witness the same foul and see two completely different versions of what happened, depending on which team they support. This phenomenon extends into basic perception itself. Studies show that our visual processing is influenced by what we expect to see. People shown ambiguous images are more likely to interpret them in line with their pre-existing worldview. Our senses don't just record reality, they reconstruct it in real time based on mental models. And it doesn't just shape how we see the world, it shapes the world we create together. When enough people share the same biases and avoid dissonant truths, these distortions don't cancel out. They compound, creating powerful cultural feedback loops. Left unchecked, they can reinforce ideologies, entrench systemic injustice, and create mass delusions that feel like common sense. When enough people believe, it becomes reality. Shared beliefs don't just live in our minds, they manifest in the physical world. This is where we encounter what philosophers and sociologists call social constructionism, the way human beliefs, when shared widely enough, manifest as concrete reality. Money provides the perfect example. Currency is just a physical object, yet we collectively agree it has value, and through that agreement it acquires real purchasing power. The belief creates the reality. If an entire society believes a king is divine, then he is divine to those believers. His power doesn't come from actual supernatural abilities, but from the fact that enough people act like he has them. Their belief creates real consequences. They build him palaces, fight wars in his name, follow his decrees. The king's divinity may be metaphysically questionable, but its effects on society are undeniably real. If a civilization trusts that a certain ritual brings rain, that belief alone will influence their decisions, when they plant, how they prepare, and how they interpret the weather. The ritual might not physically alter atmospheric conditions, but it creates psychological certainty that enables coordinated action. Communities might plant at optimal times, not because the ritual works meteorologically, but because it works socially, synchronizing agricultural activities around a shared calendar of meaningful events. Anthropologist Clifford Geertz called these shared frameworks webs of significance, intricate networks of meaning that humans spin and then inhabit. We create these webs together, and then they create us, shaping our very sense of self and reality. Shared beliefs don't just exist in our heads, they get baked into laws, traditions, and institutions. Over time, what starts as a story, a whispered myth, an unspoken rule, gets written down, enforced, and treated as fact. Nations are ultimately shared stories, with borders that exist primarily in collective agreement. Corporations are legal fictions that coordinate human behavior. Marriage is a social contract given meaning through cultural consensus. And this is where belief gets really interesting, because once something is repeated enough times, it stops feeling like a belief at all. It just becomes the way things are. The sociologist Pierre Bourdieu called this doxa, beliefs so fundamental and naturalized that they appear not as beliefs, but as objective reality itself. They become invisible precisely because they're so universal within a culture, like water to fish. The neuroarchitecture of belief. After nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world. Author Philip Pullman. Stories aren't a luxury of civilization. They're a function of being human. Once our basic needs are met, food, safety, connection, we begin to crave meaning. Psychologist Abraham Maslow captured this need for meaning in his hierarchy of needs, a motivational model often visualized as a pyramid. It originally proposed 5 stages, later expanded to 7, suggesting that once basic needs like food, safety, and connection are met, people naturally seek self-actualization, the fulfillment of personal potential and purpose. While the model has been debated over the years, particularly in terms of how universally it applies across different cultures and life contexts, its core insight remains powerful. It helps us see how meaning making isn't separate from survival, it emerges from it. Once stability is in place, humans don't just want to live, they want to understand why they're alive. Stories help us navigate the unknown, make sense of suffering, pass on wisdom, and imagine futures we haven't yet lived. And the power of story isn't just emotional or cultural, it's neurological. When we tell and listen to stories, our brains begin to synchronize. The same regions light up in both speaker and listener, aligning attention, emotion, and even memory. This neural mirroring helps us connect not just with the story, but with each other. Shared stories create shared minds. They forge common understanding out of individual experience. That's why, across the globe, different cultures often tell remarkably similar stories of great floods, sky gods, underworld journeys, or cosmic creation. These patterns aren't just inherited, they're emergent, arising from the way human brains are wired to feel, fear, and find meaning. Emotional resonance plays a key role. A story about loss or hope activates more than language centers. It lights up the limbic system, which governs our emotional processing, memory formation, and motivational behavior, encoding the experience more deeply than abstract information ever could. In this way, belief systems, and the stories that carry them, are neurocognitive blueprints, shaped by evolution, fired by emotion, and bound together through rhythm, metaphor, and shared experience. The stories may differ, but the human need behind them is always the same. Modern life, ancient instincts. Fast forward to today, and not much has changed at our core. We've swapped cave paintings for TikToks and tribal gatherings for football matches, but the human needs underneath are the same: connection, meaning, and shared stories. The digital landscape has become our modern savannah, and we navigate it with the same Stone Age brains. Consider how social media algorithms exploit our agent detection bias. We're more likely to engage with content that triggers outrage because our brains instantly attribute malicious intent to the other side. These platforms didn't create tribal psychology. They engineered it, amplifying the cognitive tendencies that once helped us distinguish friend from foe. Our pattern-seeking tendencies manifest in how we consume information online. We don't encounter facts neutrally. We immediately connect them to existing narratives. A single data point becomes evidence of a larger trend. An isolated incident becomes proof of systemic forces. Whether it's seeing conspiracy in coincidence or divine providence in random events, we're using the same pattern recognition software that once helped our ancestors predict seasonal changes or animal migrations. Modern tribes aren't just physical anymore. They live online. Fandoms, political groups, crypto subcultures, they shape belief as powerfully as ancient myths once did. These digital communities reinforce shared worldviews, offer identity markers, and provide the same sense of belonging once forged through shared narrative. The biochemistry of tribal belonging hasn't changed. We still get dopamine hits from in-group affirmation and stress responses from out-group threats. Our brains still release oxytocin when we feel socially connected, whether around a campfire or in a Discord server. The language of digital tribes reveals their psychological function. We follow thought leaders, subscribe to belief systems, and share modern myths. We signal group membership through profile pictures, specialized vocabulary, and ritualized responses to current events. We participate in collective outrage against norm violators, digital versions of the public shaming that once maintained social order in small communities. We may have traded firelight for blue light, but we're still wired the same way. The screens may be new, but the cognitive architecture behind them, the need to collectively shape reality through shared beliefs, dates back to the dawn of humanity. Humanity's mental blueprint. Our minds sought more than survival. They reached towards something more. Over time, the instincts that once kept us alive became tools for constructing meaning. Pattern recognition became myth. Empathy became morality. Storytelling became shared identity. Evolutionary biologist E.O. Wilson proposed that humans possess an innate biophilia, a natural affinity for life and living systems. Perhaps we also possess a mythotropism, a deep-rooted tendency to orient ourselves towards stories that organize and make sense of experience. This cognitive tendency helps us find significance in our existence. Cognitive scientist Merlin Donald argues that human evolution passed through a mythic stage where our ancestors developed the capacity for narrative thought, enabling them to create shared mental models of their world. This adaptation allowed us to pass meaning forward. Instincts became stories, and those stories became blueprints. What once warned us of danger eventually shaped religions, philosophies, and worldviews, systems powerful enough to move mountains and build civilizations. The psychological foundations were deceptively simple: pattern recognition, agent detection, confirmation bias, social monitoring, and narrative transportation. Yet from these basic cognitive building blocks emerged the breathtaking complexity of human culture, from Neolithic cave paintings to space exploration, from tribal creation myths to quantum physics. But it all started here, with minds reaching beyond survival, trying to make sense of the unknown, with brains evolved to notice patterns, detect agents, and share stories around fires, with psychological mechanisms that allowed us not just to persist, but to create meaning. So, what happened next? When did belief become something more than thought, something you could see, touch, and pass down? To find the answer, we have to go back, not just to the dawn of civilization, but to the moment when our ancestors stood on the edge of understanding and took their first steps toward meaning. And sometimes those steps led deep into the dark. Thanks for listening to Beyond the Narrative.